Thank you, Councillor Crowley. Yes, we're certainly moving this amendment with my colleagues, and I hope that people here tonight and people watching in will understand that we made no effort to delay this bill in any shape, maker, form, and the number of amendments should provide that also. But as I said, I'm happy to make some brief remarks on these amendments. And given the gravity of what it is we're dealing with here, I also hope that a certain latitude will prevail in discussion. That was my hope, certainly, but don't see it. I'm not holding out any great hope that our own amendments will be accepted, any of them. And we saw that at committee where you, Minister, were really set your face against any amendments that we put down in good faith. And thanks to the Council last night for your intervention, where we were being told that, we were doing all kinds of things and that we had ulterior motives and to put down amendments. We're entitled, every deputy is entitled to put down amendments and move them. And I'm glad that none of that has occurred tonight, and that we had a reasonable and respectful debate. And it's our duty in a bill like this to every member to peruse the bill, take advice on it, look at international practices and practices elsewhere, and try and, as far as I'm concerned, sanitise the ferocious nature of this bill. And that's merely what we were doing in those amendments. And I note, I don't want to be critical of the Bill's Office, but there was problems with the Bill's Office on a number of fronts regarding names being on them and who and what, and even names that didn't want to be on one or two of the ones that we had, and they were sent in without those names, and then they were put on with it. And it's a pity, because it's a very fraught issue, and people, have reasons for not supporting an amendment or reasons for supporting an amendment. And I think that was a pity. As I said, this bill, Minister, and the Minister has said earlier, like he wasn't going to breach his word and breach his commitment to the people, and what he did during the election, and the whole the 3 days was discussed. While I refrained from getting involved in commenting on it, we know where that came from. We know that came from your own colleague, Minister, who told us all that that was going in for good reasons. You described it in other terms at committee, but that's where it was. And as I said, Dr. Peter Thompson told the committee on the 8th Amendment that 40 years ago the Westminster Parliament passed a private member's bill ensuring that doctors who performed abortion under certain circumstances would not be performing an unlawful act. Yet, despite the fact that it was amended by the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act 1990, all subsequent attempts to have the Act amended have failed. I believe the same will happen here in terms of positive life affirming amendments, and that's a huge concern. The most striking aspect of the bill, as I said, and indeed the majority of the amendments before us, is the total absence of any positive reference to the unborn child. And that's where I feel so strong about and passionate about, and so do a large number of people out there who voted. As I said, they had the heads of the bill, but they hadn't anything like feeling what was going to be the outcome, what legislation was going before us. And as I said already, on many occasions, they voted to repeal the 8th Amendment. And they handed the duty of legislation rightfully to the Oireachtas members elected for the time being in these houses. And I'm privileged to be one of them for the moment, and I'm doing my best to ensure that the bill is sanitised and that it is reflective of the people, and even that voted for whatever which way, after a lot of debates and interaction and cannabis and everything else, and people in an honest effort trying to engage and trying to find out and trying to imagine what might be put before us after the 8 was removed. And, that's really what decision they made. But we saw from the Amárach poll, which people in the government side like to think about polls. I'm not a big man into polls, but on the exit poll, that's up to 44% of people who voted yes. That they didn't realise or think that they'd be paying for it, even though they were voting for to repeal the 8. They didn't want to be paying for the abortions. So we know that the protections afforded to the unborn child and mother, and which were guaranteed by the 8th Amendment, no longer remain in place. They're gone, and the people have that in their hands. They voted that, and we have to accept democracy. That being said, the heads of the bill as they were presented to us. And indeed, the bill before us now should not be seen as a blank slate from which we can draw the most extreme conclusions. And that's, very, very true. Our laws in this area and the amendments which seek to modify them ought to express the guiding and deepest principles of our nation. And that's where we are in this day in 2018. I see nothing in the majority of the amendments before us which gave expression to that view. As I say, they are, by significantly a majority, devoid of any reference even to the right of the unborn child to die a painless death where possible. And Deputy Healy is right. We did meet a number of people who came over to travel to educators, who I met a number of them, who were their life was intended to be ended in the womb and be aborted, but they, for some miracle or whatever, survived. And they were aborted and left to die. But thankfully, a nurse, in both cases, I met her, our paramedic had compassion and offered some sustenance, and they now are adults and they have families themselves. And I think that those experiences left a deep impression on me and on anyone that cared to listen. We do know that when they tried to talk here and book hotels to give expression to the views, that the hotels were picketed and told and threatened and everything else went on. And that's water under the bridge now, but it's very important that that would be recognised, because no matter what happens here or when this bill is finished, and as I said, we are not delaying it by 1 minute, history will be recorded at some stage, and what we said and done and voted will be recorded, and only time will tell as to what way that history will be. And we know the history in England, we know the history in America, safe, legal and rare, and millions and millions of abortions later. So, it's a slippery slope. So I leave it at that for the moment and defer to my colleagues, Count Cola.